Hi guys, it's Mike here with Quick Thought. I previously recorded this video, but I was sort of all over the place, so I wanted to come back and state my thoughts a little more concise. Within the Song of Ice and Fire fandom, there's no secret that Rhaenyra in Team Black's cause has a superior backing within the fandom and is notably at the top of the hierarchy of the realm's just arguments. However, while relating and definitely understanding the sole backing behind Rhaenyra's cause, I have seemingly and solidly landing on the green side of the axle for some time now, with my stance on the matter becoming somewhat engraved permanently. It should be noted that this isn't an argument for the sake of simply seeing both sides of an already faulty coin, but more importantly, my personal thoughts and explanation of what could have been a path of least resistance, resulting in a realm with fewer to senseless bloodshed, an established Targaryen dynasty for years to come, and the preservation of the epitome of Targaryen power, the dragons. I'll put forth the argument of male primogeniture first, as I'm sure it's more than likely the case you've heard countless times with tedious variations in between. Also, it's notably the most sought after argument for Team Green apologists. Furthermore, it's without a doubt the basis majority of the realm would and did use to justify their backing of the High Towers and the Green faction of House Targaryen. Male primogeniture had hundreds of long-standing in Westerosi history, minus the Principality of Dorne, who openly accepted women rulers for some time now. Most notably is probably the powerhouse of her woman, Princess Miriam Martell, or the Yellowtoad of Dorne. She was the princess regnant of the Principality of Dorne during the conquest of Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives. Regnant meaning she ruled in her own right and should not be confused with regent, who rules for the presumed heir until they become of age. Following her grandmother was the Princess Daria Martell, who was the daughter of Nymer Martell, who was actually Miriam's son. Shortly after her was the Princess Mar Martell, who was actually the reigning ruler of Dorne during the King Jaehaerys I Targaryen. And also in the current story, Prince Doran Martell's current daughter, Arianne, who's actually a POV character, is his current heir. Whatever the case may be, I think we get the point. The Dornish is much more progressive than their 6 northern counterparts. There's a reason, and there's no coincidence you see majority men as the head of their house, as opposed to ladies through majority of Westerosi history. Notably, there are many cases of ladies becoming widowed, or simply without a competing legitimate male heir to attest her claim, becoming the inherent head of her house. If there were brothers, older or younger, the line of succession is pretty clear. Being modeled after the 7 kingdoms of medieval Anglo-Saxon England, the Westerosi line of succession states as follows.
When the monarch dies, or abdicates, but usually dies, the crown goes to the eldest son who isn't naturally dead. If there happens to be an elder daughter, tough luck to her. Baby brother gets the crown.
A brother, older or younger, will inherit over his sisters. After all brothers, older or younger, have contested for the throne, only then in which the eldest sister will be in line for the succession, and the younger sister after her. There are even some medieval countries that would go as far as placing an uncle or a male cousin at the top of that hierarchy of line of succession over a female daughter of a late monarch. Furthermore, allowing Rhaenyra to inherit over her brothers Aegon, Aemon, and Daeron not only contradicts hundreds of years of set precedent, but I'll argue it sets the basis for eldest sisters throughout the 6 kingdoms to contest their brother's inheritance, which in itself would lead to plenty of rebellions and civil casualties throughout all of the kingdoms. As we all know, Aegon the Conqueror had an eldest sister, the Queen Visenya, rider of the monstrous Vhagar. However, Visenya was not named the Queen Regnant and Aegon her king or prince consort. This is because even with the Targaryens, they held male primogeniture over female primogeniture, much like the majority of Westeros, minus the Principality of Dorne. This alone can lead one to believe that even the Valyrians, before coming to Westeros, were constructed by a patriarchal system in itself favorably of the male inheritance. Lastly, in the sight of Westerosi customs, we must address the conflict of the Great Council of 101 AC and the snuffing of the Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. As we all know, the events of the Great Council of 101 AC, I more so want to touch on the specifics, or rather comparisons, that seem to get overlooked in the fandom more often than not. The Princess Rhaenys Targaryen would have definitely inherited the throne if she were Dornish, no doubt about it. Being a woman, she was passed over for her eldest male cousin, Viserys. It's important to note, this is the very reason her son, Laenor, was passed over at the Great Council of 101 AC. The male inheritant lines holds precedent over the female line. Knowing this information, the argument can be made that even though Rhaenyra was made rightfully the heir by her father, the king, her children, rather bastards or not, would not be able to inherit the Iron Throne, simply being an extension of the female line rather than male. This alone could and did give many Westerosi lords the means to back Aegon and his children over Rhaenyra and hers. Secondly, the means of legitimate blood rights. I and many in the fandom supported Stannis Baratheon simply because we knew he had an inherent blood right over the Iron Throne. I will be the absolute first to say I wholeheartedly love Cersei Lannister, and she alone, with Tywin, are the dual pillars in which my love for the Lannisters of Casterly Rock stem. However, I supported and understood both Baratheon brothers' just cause at summoning their banners against Joffrey as the presumed heir. In the case for Rhaenyra's children, there are some in the fandom that say, unlike Joffrey and his siblings' supposed House of Baratheon, House Velaryon accepted Rhaenyra's children and never took up arms against them, which we all know isn't the case for the Baratheon brothers. Firstly, I'll argue one individual's liking or accepting of the alleged bastards isn't influential enough or even strong enough grounds to stand on for an entire country to wipe out hundreds of years of precedent, tradition, and culture. Robert, although not liking the company of his elder son Joffrey, did believe him and his siblings to be his children. But that surely wasn't enough for Eddard Stark to betray his dying friend in his last hours, changing Joffrey to the wording of rightful heir. And it surely wasn't enough to convince the Baratheon brothers to just go along with the succession in the name that the king accepts them as his own. And it's also not going to be enough to convince the brothers of Rhaenyra, King Aegon II, Prince Aemon, or Prince Daeron to go along with it in the name that their sister, the Queen, accepts her bastards as hers and Sir Laenor's. Rhaenyra and her kids' claims would be challenged, and I believe rightfully and justfully so. All it takes is two ambitious uncles. Aegon and Aemon are Stannis and Renly. Daeron, being the youngest, was nothing more than a follower of his eldest brothers, so we'll give him a pass. Furthermore, it's often overlooked that the brothers of Rhaenyra, Aegon II, Aemon and Daeron, committed the same actions as the Baratheon brothers. However, they were actually united in their cause against Rhaenyra, as to where the Baratheon brothers were divided, and not to mention the Targaryen brothers of the Green faction have the epitome of power: dragons. By the time of the dance, Aegon II is a man grown with multiple kids who himself likes to sleep around with the whores and dabble with them, much like his uncle Daemon. I make this point to say, Aegon II, although having to be convinced to take up arms against his sister Rhaenyra by his mother, Aegon is 24 by the end of all of this. Old enough to decipher and make his own decisions, and rule in his own stead. So therefore, I think it's unjust and unnecessarily fair to place the blame on his mother, the Queen Alicent, which happens more times than not in the fandom, at least with Team Black. Which is not a surprise, given tons of the time, Team Black enthusiasts have this annoyingly strange, uncontrollable urge to blame adults for the actions of other adults. This is normal for Team Black. It happens with Alicent in regards of her children, as it does for Sir Otto in regards to Viserys. All the man-growns need to take accountability. But back on topic. Being modeled after the Seven Kingdoms of medieval Anglo-Saxon England, the rules of succession were pretty clear on bastards. If all possible, don't be one.
Second, don't be a bastard. Sometimes it's good to be the king, but it's never good to be the illegitimate children of the king who are out of line for the crown from literally the moment of their conception.
Not being a bastard was obviously the best way to avoid being passed over on the throne simply because your parents weren't married. However, as we don't get to choose what marital situations we're born into, one simply has to make the best of their situation, as plenty of bastards have done throughout Westerosi history. One of my absolute favorite A Song of Ice and Fire YouTubers, the wonderful, lovely, and beautiful Gray Area, here on YouTube, who's undoubtedly on the black side of the axle, recently made the valid points of multiple Westerosi bastards inheriting their family's titles and holdings throughout the kingdoms. A few being Robb making Jon his apparent heir before the Red Wedding, also Jon about to be legitimized by Stannis later on in the story, as well as Aegon the Conqueror's bastard half-brother Orys being gifted with Storm's End, and lastly how Rhaenyra legitimized Corlys's bastard in hopes he'll inherit Driftmark after Corlys. All of these are great and classical examples of bastards reaping what's rightfully theirs throughout Westerosi history. However, it's extremely important to note and recognize all of these situations have one very important aspect in common. There were no apparent legitimate male heir presumed alive at the time. I'll repeat that. There were no apparent legitimate male heirs alive at the time during each course of these actions. When Robb made Jon his heir, he thought that Bran and Rickon were murdered by the Ironborn, meaning his thoughts were more so that there were no presumed heirs to inherit Winterfell, giving Jon all of those rights. Importantly, noting him skipping over Sansa and Arya being girls, justifying my earlier point, that most in real and fictional history would rather pass their inheritance down through the male line of inheritance rather than female, granting Aegon II's claim precedent over Rhaenyra's for most throughout the realm. Jon about to be legitimized by Stannis, the same scenario can also apply. There are no presumed heirs of Winterfell. Jon and Stannis are both under the impression that Bran and Rickon, the legitimate male heirs after Robb, are both dead. Aegon the Conqueror extinguished Argilac, leaving no legitimate male heirs. Then, and only then, naming his bastard half-brother the Lord of Storm's End. Having previous examples, it should be noted that if Argilac had had a male heir, Aegon the Conqueror would have without a doubt named them the Lord of Storm's End over his bastard half-brother. Also, noting my previous point yet again, that Aegon the Conqueror skipped over Argilac's daughter in the line of inheritance, placing his bastard half-brother as Storm's End's lord. And lastly, how Rhaenyra legitimized Corlys' bastards in hope that he will inherit Driftmark after Corlys. Yet again, there are no legitimate male heirs to contest the succession. All of these cases further solidify my backing of Team Green holding the stature of natural-born inheritance at the top of the hierarchy. These are the exact reasons why I supported the Baratheon brothers, and these are the exact reasons why I'm supporting the Targaryen brothers of the Green faction. Supporting Rhaenyra, not having one but 3 illegitimate sons, contesting at the Iron Throne, all the while having legitimate brothers alive, well, it just doesn't seem right in my book. I possibly could have backed Rhaenyra if I felt she would have been honest with the realm about her 3 eldest sons, and maybe contest Aegon III's claim at the throne. But that in itself is a strong possibly, being he would have been an extension of his mother, a female line. So there you go, guys. Those are my reasonings on why I am Team Green. I know some or most of the fandom will call me a woman-hating, misogynist, patriarchal bastard, but I promise that's far from the case. All the reasonings I stated earlier, I truly believe would have resulted in the realm with less bloodshed, an established Targaryen dynasty for many more years to come, even longer than what we see in the main series, and the preservation of the epitome of Targaryen strength and power, the dragons. So there you go, guys. Those are my not-so-special reasonings on why I'm Team Green. On the basis of male inheritance and primogeniture, and legitimate and natural blood rights, I just think that King Aegon II, Aemon One Eye, and Daeron the Daring just have a longer and more solid standing, historically speaking, in Westeros. One can and would definitely be justified in making the argument that, unlike Joffrey and his siblings, Rhaenyra's kids are the actual legitimate kids of the apparent heir, Rhaenyra herself. However, that would definitely go back to my previously stated point, that the female line of inheritance cannot trump the male line. This is exactly what happened at the Great Council of 101 AC with Laenor. That's why Laenor was not chose over Viserys, because he was an extension of Rhaenys, a woman. Hey guys, I don't make the rules, I just like to follow them. And that's why I definitely think the Targaryen brothers of the Green faction were justified in the usurping of their sister and their nephew's throne. As I rightfully backed Stannis and Renly against their nephews, it would feel a little bit unjust to not back Aegon II, Aemon, and Daeron against their nephews. Hey, it's really the same concept if you break it down. Before we head out, I want to hit on a couple of points I hear Team Black enthusiasts make quite often. The first one being that Rhaenyra would have never harmed her siblings. Although this may seem true from the forefront, it's not always that easily cut. Queen Elizabeth I refused to execute her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, for almost 2 decades, with numerous counselors convincing her execution was the best course of action. It was also known that Queen Elizabeth I cared for her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, acknowledging the unpleasant situation in which they both have been forced into. However, after 19 years of imprisonment, Mary Queen of Scots was beheaded at Fotheringhay Castle by her cousin, Elizabeth I. It would not be unusual for Rhaenyra to come to a decision like this after 2 decades of being advised by those little schemers on the small council and of course her psychopath of an uncle husband, Damon. Secondly, the notion that Team Black somehow wins this war, which I'm not really sure how you can come to that conclusion. Quick spoiler alert, but Rhaenyra gets torn apart by her brother, Aegon II's dragon, right in front of her son, Aegon III. Adding to that, Rhaenyra has a rather short reign, if we can call it a reign at all. However, her 3 bastard sons never sit the Iron Throne, all of who were at the basis of the Civil War of the Dance of Dragons. After Aegon II's short reign, much like his elder sister, you know who sits the Iron Throne? You got it. The young frightened boy who watched his mother get devoured by a dragon, Aegon III. A non-bastard male heir. I should repeat that. A non-bastard male heir. The exact claim the Greens were fighting for. The whole reason the war started in the first place. So I'll argue the Blacks' cause was all for nothing. It was useless. Rhaenyra didn't achieve anything revolutionary as she so hoped. What followed was just a continuation of what already had hundreds of years of long-standing in Westerosi history. Male primogeniture and legitimate blood rights. Exactly what the Greens were fighting for. Well guys, that's all I have to say about this situation. Let me hear your thoughts down below. George R. Martin's dynamic and one-of-a-kind way of storytelling is the reasons we have the Blacks and the Greens now. And I think that's one of the beauties in the way that he writes. And I definitely think that should be embraced. While I am definitely a Team Green enthusiast, I welcome Team Black and Team Green supporters alike to the channel. Let's have an open discussion. Let's talk about this beautiful art that is A Song of Ice and Fire. This channel will definitely be a safe place for Team Green apologists, but not for the ones that seem a bit of extremists, just outright misogynist assholes. I think everyone should go follow some of my favorite YouTubers of A Song of Ice and Fire. Most of are definitely notably more on the Team Black side of things, but they're awesome nonetheless. They have really good content and they're just flipping good people all around. Gray Area and the Direwolf City podcast, Tony Teflon, David Lifebringer, and Bridge 4. And also for honorable mentions, Why Create and the World of Westeros. I'll also be releasing more than just of A Song of Ice and Fire content on the channel, but I'll let you guys see it and we'll just see how it goes. Alright guys, that's all I have for you guys right now. You guys take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.